Every science nerd has his day. And this was supposed to be our day. We dreamed of it as far back as 8th grade when we took the tour of the high school and they showed us where we're going to be next year. And all the kids were like, wow, football games, parties. And we instead heard them say, next year in 9th grade, you're going to get to take introductory physical science with Mrs. Newsom, where you will build a Rube Goldberg machine. Those of you who don't know what a Rube Goldberg machine is, it's some machine that uses vast complexity to accomplish a simple task. So like a marble rolls down a thing, and then it lands on a thing, and a thing does that kind of thing. So that's what we were going to do. I love Rube Goldberg machines. I've been obsessed with them since I was little, ever since I saw that scene in Pee-wee's Big Adventure with the breakfast machine. You know what I'm talking about? I love that. I used to sit in class and doodle Rube Goldberg machines on the paper covers of my textbooks. I dreamed that someday I'd have to make one, and now I was going to have to make one. I assembled an elite team of science nerds. It was me and Steve and Jared. And just to give you a sense of these guys, Jared is best embodied for me in the 6 words that he said when he was my seat partner on the marching band road trip to Florida. And he woke up in the middle of the night and looked up at me from the floor where he was sleeping and said, "I've got floss up my nose." And he did. He had dental floss hanging out of his nose. I don't know why. I don't know if it was intentional. That's Jared. So Jared and Steve and I went to Jared's basement every day after school, and we'd work on this machine, and we planned that we're not just going to make the best Rube Goldberg machine in the class. We were going to make the best Rube Goldberg machine in history. Because this was our day. This was all we had. We weren't invited to the parties. We had time to work on the Rube Goldberg machine. So we decided that our Rube Goldberg machine, from front to end, was going to simulate 9 natural disasters, which were, in order, an avalanche, Godzilla pushing over a building, the Exxon Valdez oil spill, the San Francisco earthquake, the Great Chicago Fire, a flood, a volcano, the Tunguska meteorite, and finally, the greatest disaster of all, the 1993 Phillies, who had just lost the World Series because of the pitching of someone named Mitch Williams, who everybody in town hated. And so our simulation of that was going to be that we're going to convince someone in class to put their chin down on the board, and at the very end of our machine, a mousetrap was going to spring a pie into his face. That was going to be the last step. So we've been working on this for a couple of weeks when Mrs. Newsom came up to us and said, "If you guys don't mind, could you add another person to your group? Gina doesn't have anyone to work with." We were a little concerned. We didn't know Gina too well. She'd just come from Vietnam. We knew she was smart and she seemed to be nice, but would she have the same nerdy dedication to this project that we did? And it turned out Gina was very good. She was creative. She liked coming over to Jared's house and working on the project. We didn't have to worry about Gina. We should have worried about Steve. Somehow, the Rube Goldberg machine unleashed Steve's inner pyromaniac, which must have been dormant for years until he realized that, hey, we're working on a thing that uses fire. And he would just sit there. I can remember him in Jared's garage. He'd take a match, he'd strike it, and use it to light the rest of the pack of matches, and watch it go, and then throw it in the corner, and just watch it smolder. That was Steve's amusement. So we worked on this for weeks, and finally we brought it up from Jared's basement into his garage the night before it was due, and we decided we're going to do one big test run. And we realized, as we were getting ready for the final test run, that it was also, whoops, the first test run. Because when we had extra time, we always, we wouldn't put it into making sure that the pieces all worked in harmony. Instead, we would make sure that one piece worked, and then we'd say, great, now we've got time to go build more pieces. So we had this big sprawling thing that had never been tested. And I know exactly what happened the night before it was due because we have this test on video. And all you can see is us running around the machine frantically yelling, "No, no, 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 no!" And Jared is saying, it's not gonna work, you guys, it's not gonna work, it's not gonna work. And you can actually hear me as I'm running down Jared's driveway yelling, the adrenaline says it will. So, the next day we got up early, we loaded everything into Jared's dad's truck, and we drove to school. And even though we're nervous about whether the machine is going to work, we are confident. Because this is our day. We roll into school like one of those movies where they're trying to illustrate that people are a posse, and so they show them walking really slow. That's us coming in. And people are like, oh, this is my machine. It's got 6 steps. This is my machine. It has 8 steps, and at the end it puts a letter in a mailbox. And we're like, yeah. Our machine has 61 steps. Jared, Steve, bring it in. And they come in with this massive piece of plywood, and kids are like, oh, that's your machine? That's piece 1A. The rest's in the truck. Let's go outside. So we took all the pieces in and we assembled it. It took up a quarter of Mrs. Newsom's classroom. All the other kids get to run theirs before we get to ours. Then finally, it's ours, and the kids are crowded around. I mean, like packed, face to face, next to each other as they're looking at this machine. They're all bent over it. We hardly have the room to light all the candles and get everything ready. And I take that first marble, and I drop it. The marble rolls down the ramp. It triggers the avalanche. The avalanche lands on a lever, which pushes up another lever, which knocks over the building for Godzilla, which lands on a lever, which pushes up a candle, which cuts through a piece of dental floss. Thank you, Jared. Which it's better than rope for these things. And it releases a fishing weight, which sinks the Exxon Valdez, and it also cuts through another one, which releases a rubber band, and the city of San Francisco shakes. And at the end of the city of San Francisco is a nail, and tied to the nail is a little plastic cow, because Mrs. O'Leary's cow started the Chicago fire, and that cow knocks over a lantern, which is 3 candles in a block of wood, and as that lantern is falling through the air, I flash back on something that I said while we were hastily setting up the machine, and that was, you're in charge of the lighter fluids, Steve. The city of Chicago goes up in flames. As it was meant to, but many flames. And before the kids who are all surrounding this thing about an inch from the board can fly back, Mrs. Newsom, who was always the vigilant 9th grade science teacher, had a fire extinguisher in her hand. She comes over, she unloads this thing on the machine. This thick yellow dust, which I've later learned is monoammonium sulfate, flies everywhere. Kids have it going in their eyes, in their lungs. They're running back, I can't see, I can't breathe, I need water. No one has it as bad as the poor kid who had volunteered to put his chin on the machine for the pie. Pie never came up. Monoammonium sulfate, that he got. And as the machine has stopped working right before the flood, which was supposed to trigger the volcano, the Tunguska meteorite, we can see that instead the whole machine has stopped and is just covered with a layer of yellow dust. And even though Mrs. Newsom let us come back later during her planning period that demonstrates that the second half of the machine would have worked, the damage was done. We may not have had our victory. We did have vengeance. We'll take that. I don't know where Gina is nowadays. I know that Jared has abandoned science in favor of the second nerdiest pursuit, clarinet. Steve, the pyromaniac, is a surgeon. And I'm a molecular biologist. I like what I do. I like science in general. But I've never felt the exuberance that I had over making that Rube Goldberg machine in 9th grade. Because that's the kind of thing you do when you're 14 and you just have so much time. Thank you.